Hello, everyone. Welcome to Automation Hour. And let me just go into presentation mode. Great. All right, if you're joining us for the first time, all lines are muted. If you have any questions, please post to the chat. We will post the recording after the session as well as a link to the deck. So you will be able to find the link to the recording on automationhour.com as well as our Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour. And if you haven't signed up for our sessions that are booked out for through the end of July, please encourage you to do so. So you can go out on automationhour.com to register for those. And if you have a business use case with a cool process automation, reach out to us offline, and then we will get you scheduled into one of our future sessions for the rest of the year. And we can't bring this free online webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io, so shout out to them. And here are your co-hosts with myself, Rakesh, and David. And I'm excited to bring on a fellow MVP, Sarah Amin, and she's going to talk through a problem that we might occasionally face with mixed DML operation errors when you're having a flow edit both a user object as well as a standard or custom object. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Sarah. And you should have control.
Okay. Can you see my screen with my picture on it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. All right. So thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for having me. I've seen so many of these Automation Hour presentations. I'm so excited to be speaking at one now. My name's Sarah Amin. I'm a senior consultant at North Peak Solutions. I've been a Salesforce MVP for almost a year now. I co-lead the Raleigh, North Carolina Women in Tech User Group, and I'm the volunteer coordinator for the Southeast Stream and Planning Committee. You can find me on Twitter at Sarah Amin NC. Feel free to follow me, to reach out if you have any questions. I'd be happy to connect with you. Okay, so I mentioned that I am the volunteer coordinator for Southeast Stream-In. The conference is in Atlanta, March 26th and 27th, and I wanted to bring this up today because the first day of the conference is a hands-on training day. It's a half day, so there are 2 blocks of sessions, and in each of the 2 blocks of sessions, I've marked them here with stars, are hands-on training sessions specific to automation. These ones all happen to be flow and process builder based, and Automation Hour's own Jen Lee is going to be presenting Today's the Day, Conquer Your Fear of Flow. But there are 2 sessions in each of the hands-on training blocks. These are not Trailhead. They are custom designed hands-on training sessions that are designed by each of the presenters. The second day of Southeast Stream-In is breakout sessions, and there are also some presentations on that day on automation. So if you haven't registered yet, please come and join us, especially if you're local to Atlanta or in a close geographic area. And if you have registered, make sure that you're signing up for your hands-on training sessions because these are limited seating. So we need to make sure we have enough room for all of the people with all of the laptops. Okay. So I want to start out by introducing you to one of our clients. Forefront is a nonprofit organization that has member organization, so they're a membership nonprofit, and they aim to bring resources and training to grant makers and operating nonprofits and advisory firms to make them better organizations, to help them be amazing. in the example that we'll go through today is an operating nonprofit, but the large majority of their members are grant-making organizations. So for each of their member organizations, they have 3 key contacts: a primary contact, an administrative contact, and a billing contact. In addition to these key contacts, they have several other contacts they care about as well. But these 3 key contacts play the majority of the role in our story today, which is about managing their access to Forefront Salesforce Community. So let's talk a little bit about their Salesforce Community. They are using it's a customer community, and they're using customer community login licenses. So they're all customer community login users. They're using self-registration, and they have 2 profiles. The profile that by default each user is assigned to when they first self-register is the basic user profile, and then there's also an admin user profile. And the admin user profile is related to those key contacts, that primary, admin, and billing contacts that we just talked about. So let's take a closer look at their community. Their community is just part of their website, so it's embedded into their website. And the 2 main pages for the basic users are My Profile and My Organization. You'll notice on My Profile, it's fields from their contact record, so they can see what information the Forefront has on file for them in case they need to make any updates to their contact details. And My Organization gives them information about the member organization with which they're affiliated. For basic users, they are able to view this information only. Their main motivation as basic users to self-registering on the website is to gain access to other member-only features that as authenticated users they're able to access. So we're going to closely look at the My Organization page because this is where we have most of the differences between the basic user and the admin user. So I have collapsed 3 sections at the bottom here: the contact information, member information, and need help sections, just for purposes of being able to see everything on one screen. But they are able to access all of those fields as well. But the primary thing we want to look at here is that they are only able to view the information on this record. If we look at this same page from the view of the admin user, you'll notice that they are able to edit several fields on the record, the My Organization record, which is their account record. They're able to edit their organization name, their address, their phone number, fax, email, etc. So lots of their contact information. And the reason I collapse these sections is because they're also able to view a list below the record. They can view the related list of the staff that's affiliated with their organization. So not only are they able to edit details on the account record, but they're also able to see additional information that the basic users won't have access to. So I wanted to pause quickly and just make sure everyone was on the same page with me. I don't see any questions in the chat window, but I am happy to take questions throughout the call. So feel free to post any questions you might have in the chat window, and Jen will help me to keep on track with them. So I'll continue on. No one has any questions yet. So really, what was our primary impetus for deciding to go with automation for managing the users associated with their community? So I want to talk a little bit about member management. So their member organizations are managed by relationship managers. There are 3 relationship managers for each of their primary groups: the grant makers, operating nonprofits, and advisory firms. Their relationship managers are not system administrators. They are standard users, regular staff that are managing their members, and they're not individuals that should be given system administrator access. So this presents a scalability issue, right? They have 1 administrator at Forefront. They have 3 relationship managers. They have about 200 member organizations and 3 key contacts at each of those organizations. They have about 20 additional contacts per organization on average that they also care about. Now, not all of these individuals would be self-registering on the website. They wouldn't all have the desire to do that, but say maybe they have a total of 10 contacts per organization between the key contacts and those additional contacts that care to register. That's about 2,000 users that they would need to be managing. On the grand scheme of things, that's not many users for a customer community, but is more than a single administrator has the time to manually manage over the course of their days or weeks. So our solution was to automate the management of the user profiles related to all of these community members. So we started writing down our requirements. We indicated that if the contact is set as a primary admin or billing contact on their account, on their member organization's account, the profile of their related community user should be set to community admin. And if the contact is removed from primary admin or billing, their profile should be set to the customer community basic profile. However, there is one slight complicating factor here in that one contact can play more than one role at an organization. So the primary contact could also be the billing contact and so on. So we also needed to make sure that if, say, for example, Riley was removed as the admin contact, we wouldn't want to demote him to a basic user unless he wasn't also a primary contact or billing contact. We need to make sure he wasn't any of these key contacts before demoting him. So obviously you can see it's a little bit of a tricky picture here, but we will dive into this. The first thing we did is put together a process builder. This process builder kicks off a flow. There are 3 separate criteria nodes, one for when the primary contact is changed, another for when the admin contact is changed, and a third for when the billing contact is changed. Now, each of these kicks off the same flow. So the way that the flow is written is pretty generic, so that it can handle the values passed in from any of the 3 fields changing. So for each of these flow actions, there are 4 variables being set. The current value for, so let's take this primary contact is changed as an example. The 4 values that are going to be passed in is the current value of the primary contact, so who is being set as the primary contact, the current value of the billing contact, and the current value of the admin contact. The other thing that we care about, since we need to check to see if we need to demote somebody's permissions, is we care about the prior value, the person who was the primary contact, if there is anyone, before that change was made. So those are the 4 values that are set in. The same is true for the admin contact immediate action and the billing contact immediate action. We've got 4 values being passed in for each one of these flows. So let's, instead of talking in generics, let's talk about an actual scenario. So we have this person, Sam Lang, and they are removed as the admin contact and replaced with Riley Burnap. So our current admin contact is going to be Riley Burnap. Our current primary contact is Deanne Miller. We have no billing contact, and our previous admin contact was Sam Lang. So let's take a look at what this looks like. All right, so this is our flow that gets kicked off, and you can see, as I mentioned, it's pretty generic. So we reference current value and prior value, so that it doesn't matter if this is the billing contact that's changing, the primary contact that's changing, or the admin contact that's changing. So to make this a little bit easier to follow, let's walk through our scenario. So this is a picture of Riley, and this first decision here is saying, is there a current primary or current administrative contact? And yes, there is, because we have Riley. The next step in our flow is to see if we can find a user record associated with Riley, because if a user record doesn't exist, we don't need anything to happen because there's no permissions related with this person. We found Riley's user record, and we found out that he is a basic user. His profile is a basic user profile, which I've indicated with this letter B here. The next step in the flow is a decision, and it just checks to see whether or not a user was found, which obviously it is because we found Riley and his basic user. And if somebody is found, then we're going to update his user record and promote him to have the admin user profile. After that, our flow is going to go down to this prior value decision. And this is the same resource that it would go to if if a user had not been found for the current contact. So here we have Sam Lang. So this is our previous admin contact. And this decision is checking to see, was there somebody previously in this field that we care about checking? And yes, because we have Sam here. Then we check and see if Sam has a user record, and they do. And Sam's user record is an admin user because Sam was in the one of the key contact fields. And the other thing this lookup does, we'll go back a step here. The other thing this lookup does is that it checks to see if Sam exists as a user, community user, and it also checks to see if Sam is in the other key contact fields. And it will only return a value, the user ID, if the user record exists and that person is not one of the primary or billing contacts, to make sure that if we're demoting this person's permissions, that they're not a key contact in any of the key contact fields. So if a user ID is found, this decision here says, yep, somebody is found. I'm going to go on to update their record and demote them to be a basic user. So we're removing some of their permissions. Okay. Still not seeing anything in the chat window. So just again, a reminder, feel free to post questions there if you have any questions. Just want to make sure I'm not moving too fast and everyone's following along. Okay. So we go to test this flow and we're all excited about it because in theory, it seems like it's going to be perfect. And then we get this error, an error that I will admit I had never seen before, a mixed DML operation. I thought to myself, what in the world is this? I'm reading the error message and it says that user is trying to be updated and we're trying to update this setup object, and we also have an update to the original object, which was the account object, and it's getting all confused. And what do we do here? So let's talk a little bit about mixed DML operations. So what does this even mean, a mixed DML operation? So if you have DML on a setup object in the same transaction as a standard or custom object, the system's going to get really mad at you. It's going to say, nope, you can't do that. And the reason that that's the case is because changes to some setup objects can affect user access to records. So in this case, changing the permissions of the user record might change which standard or custom object records they have access to. In this case, it does. It doesn't change which records the user, the community user has access to, but it changes the field level security that they have because their permissions are changing. So you have to use separate transactions to get these things to happen. So in a sense, we have to separate these out because Salesforce says, no, you cannot do this in one transaction. So I'm sure there are multiple ways to resolve this error, but the way that we found to do it, and this work was done in collaboration with another North Peak team member, Sherry Carlson. So she and I worked on this together. One of the things that we found to do was add a pause in between the two transactions to say, okay, we can save the change to the account record, and then we're going to wait a short amount of time, and we're going to make the change to the user permissions so they're no longer in the same transaction. So how does this look in our flow? Our flow looks in the same for the larger majority of the elements or resources within our flow. The only thing you can see that we've added is this pause at the very beginning. And this is what separates one transaction from the other. Okay, still not seeing any questions. I put a lot of pauses in here. I just want to make sure that I wasn't going too fast and I wasn't losing anyone. So we will continue on, but feel free to post your questions. All right, so you might be thinking here, 1 hour. That's what we saw in that next to that pause, 1 hour. That's because on lightning flows, 1 hour is the fastest that you can get for a pause, the shortest duration. Okay, I don't know about you, but when it comes to security permissions and permissions changing, I don't want to wait an hour. That is too long to wait for security permissions. I want them to happen right now. If there's a person that shouldn't be able to edit the organizational details on the community, they shouldn't be able to edit them right now, not an hour from now. So what did we do? Our solution was to add in a formula resource into our flow. This formula resource we named Time Trigger 1 minute. And it has the formula of now, which is a Salesforce standard formula, minus this kind of random looking number here. Several years ago, I had another client project where I needed something to happen with a very short pause as well. So I sat there and manually, trial and error, figured out what the value should be in the minus numerical value here. And what this does, it gives you about 59 minutes and 30 seconds ago. So here in my debug of the flow, you can see, and I'll show this to you when we get into Salesforce as well. But in my debug screenshot here, you can see at that time, it was 3:42 p.m. and my value in my time trigger minus 1 minute was 2:42 p.m. Again, it's about 59 minutes and 30 seconds ago. So you can't see a numerical difference between this here, but it will work to trigger in about 30 to 45 seconds. Whatever action you want to happen will happen. So you can see there's the hour difference there. So when we put in our pause to continue 1 hour later, almost instantaneously, we're getting the permission changes. Okay. Still not seeing any questions, so let's jump into Salesforce and take a look at this. So this is the Forefront Sandbox, and this is the example record scenario that we're going to go through here. The member organization is called Durham Arts Council, which is one of my favorite local nonprofits where my daughter goes to summer camp, and I'm not very good with creative naming, so we'll just go with something I know. We can see our key contacts here. So we have Deanne, we have Sam, and we have nothing in our billing contact. So we're going to work through that scenario that we went through in the slide deck to add in our new admin contact, Riley, and we're going to remove Sam. Before we do that, we'll take a look at Sam's access to the community, and we'll take a look at the automation that we've set up as well. So we will look at Sam's record. We'll log into the community. Now, when the homepage is not going to look like much here in the sandbox, their community is embedded directly into their website. So when they're logging in and changing their password, they just need to be redirected to their website. So that's why this homepage looks pretty blank. The user experience wouldn't be the same if we were logging in production. We'd log directly into the website instead of logging in via Salesforce. So if we click on my profile, we can see Sam's contact information here. And Sam's access to the organization record is the administrative level access because they're currently one of the key contacts. So there's the ability to edit the account name, address, all of the primary information related to the organization, and we can see the staff list related. And we can see Sam is the admin contact. Riley's in here, but Riley's not listed as the admin contact yet. And so we can see all this information because we are logged in as an administrative user. So now we're going to take a look at the automation, and we'll start in our process builder. So again, we have the 3 primary criteria nodes on the left-hand side of our screen. Each one kicks off the same flow, the user permissioning automation that we have set up. You'll notice on the right-hand side of my screen here, we've got 4 flow variables that are being set as part of this flow. We've got the current value 1, which is position 1 here, and this is for our administrative contact is changed node. So the first position here is our admin contact value for the current value for the admin contact. Position 2 or value 2 is the primary contact's value. Position 3 is the billing contact's value. And lastly, we've got our prior value variable, which is looking at who was the admin contact prior to this change. And if we look at the other immediate actions within our process builder, you'll see that the flow variables are in the same order, but the values being set are different. So if it was the primary contact being changed, the first position instead would be the primary contact, second position admin contact, third position billing, and the prior value is looking at the prior value of the primary contact instead of admin. So we've done this pretty generically so that the flow can be used in any of these scenarios to try and just limit the technical burden on the system. So there's not 3 flows being kicked off, it's 1 flow, but setting different variables for each use case. This also allows us to, if we had a situation where both the primary and administrative contacts were being set at the same time, it will work to change the user permissions in both situations. Okay, let's take a closer look at our automation. Get it to go back into our flow builder. Okay. So here's the first version of our automation. We have our first decision here, which is telling us that it's looking at the value that was set for current value in that first position, which in our situation is the ID of the current admin contact. And it's just checking, does the value exist? And if a value exists, or this one in this situation is saying it's not null. So if a value exists, if it's not null, then let's go on to our next step. If it is null, let's look at the prior value, because maybe it's just that the admin contact was removed and we don't know who is replacing that person. The next step here is we're going to find whether or not this person who's been set as a key contact or admin contact, see whether or not they have a user associated with them. Because if they don't have a user associated with them, there's nothing we need to update. Seems pretty simple, right? So here we're looking at the user object and we're saying, does the contact ID field on the user object match the ID of our admin contact? And if that, if the IDs match, then I want to set the ID of that user record into my user ID variable. And when no records are found, there's no user that exists, we do want it to set to null. So we can use that in our next decision. Okay. So our next decision is checking to see whether or not a user has been found, which in this case we know is true. Riley's ID in this situation, since we're going to swap out Sam for Riley, Riley's user record was found because Riley already was signed up as a user, just a basic user. And so this is going to evaluate to true, so the user ID will have a value. And that will move us on to our next resource. The next step is to update the user record. This is a pretty straightforward one where we've got our user object where the ID of the record matches the ID in our user ID variable, and we're going to update the profile ID to the admin user. Next, we're going to go down to our decision, and this decision is looking at whether or not somebody existed as a previous key contact. So in this situation, we have Sam, who we just saw, Sam's login experience for the customer community, how they're able to access the organization, my organization page with an edit level access and see the staff list. So we know that Sam already has access to the system. So was Sam in the admin field before? And this decision is going to say yes. Just checking to see, was somebody in that field before? And it's been populated. It's not null. Then we're going to check and see if Sam has a user record, which we know Sam does. And this one's the tricky one, right? Because we're not just checking to see if Sam has a user record, we're also checking to make sure Sam is not also the billing or primary contacts, because we don't want to remove permissions for somebody that should have them because they are a key contact somewhere else. This is that requirement where one user could play multiple roles. And if anyone on the call has worked with nonprofits, you can be rest assured that there are definitely staff members that are playing multiple roles at every nonprofit. So this is totally a use case that will very frequently happen. And because this flow is able to handle both the primary contact changing, the admin contact changing, and the billing contact changing, we are actually going to check all three of these values just as another double check of, hey, yep, this is a person that is not, that is removed as a key contact, and they're not in any of these other fields. So that's what this get value is doing. We could have probably done this in the decision as well, but we found it easier to do this within the record lookup. So if a user was found and they're not in any of the other key contact fields, we have a decision here that says this prior user ID is null or is not null, as the case may be. So have we found a prior user? And in this case, we have, and so we're going to, again, this is very similar to updating the current user, but updating the prior user, we're going to update the user object. We're going to update the record whose ID matches the prior user ID. We're going to set their profile back to the basic user level. Okay, so let's see this in action. We're actually going to show the error message here. So we're going to change Sam to Riley. This should not work, so we should get an error. Oh, there's the wrong one activated. I have multiple ones set up here so that we could see both scenarios. Let's look at our versions. Yep, I have the wrong one activated. Okay, so let's move this back to Sam just so you can see the error message. I promise you this was broken earlier. That's activated, that's correct. We should be able to change this to Riley and it should break. There we go. Oh, the dreams of live demos. Okay, so we have hit a snag, and here our account user permission automation process has failed. And I need to pop my email open, and we'll show that same error message that was in my screenshot about the mixed DML issues. Just get my email to load. Okay, email's not loading. Lovely. Okay, so this is the error message that we would get in my email that the mixed DML issues are occurring. And so that's how we knew to start looking on Google and on all the Salesforce forums to try and find the solution to figure out what was going on here. So there are actually two error messages that happen, as you might be very well aware of when you're working with Flow. And this is the first one where it just says there's a field integrity exception, and it doesn't really tell you much information here. And then you'll get the second error message, which actually tells you that the mixed DML issue is occurring. That one is not coming through for some reason. Here it is. So here's our mixed DML issue here. So mixed DML operation is happening. The user and the original object are not, cannot be updated at the same time. Okay, so that's when we put in, and I'll open version 3, which has our pause in it. That's when we decided to try this pause. We did some research on Google and on most of the Salesforce forums on the success community, and found that adding in a pause would help to move the transactions into separate actions. So our updates would be separate transactions there. So if we look at our formula here, we can edit this. This is our time trigger 1-minute formula. The data type of this formula is a date time formula. The formula says now, which is the formula for the current date and time, minus this random number, which I figured out years ago, is basically 59 minutes and about 30 seconds ago. So if we try to debug this version, we'll get that screenshot that I showed in we don't need any variables here because we just want to see the pause. We'll get that screenshot that we showed in my slides, and you can see that right now that this client's in Central Time Zone, so it's about an hour different from my clock. So it's being paused on February 21st at 2:36 p.m. and that formula is showing me February 21st at 1:37 p.m. So if we say we're going to wait 1 hour, then this is going to be triggered at 2:37 2:37 p.m., which would be 3:37. So if we got the flow to run successfully, in about 30 to 45 seconds, we would have the users updating. So let's activate this version of the flow because we want it to be the paused version, the one that will successfully make the changes to the system. So we should be able to save this now and see the record saved successfully, and Sam has been swapped out for Riley. So let's take a look at their profile permissions. We'll go to setup, we'll go to our users. And we'll see that Riley has been upgraded in their permissions to the Forefront Community admin user, and Sam has been demoted to the Forefront Community basic user. We already have Sam logged into the community on this page. So if we refresh this screen, we should see that the user is no longer able to edit any values on the organization record, and there's no staff list below the page. So the permissions are reflecting correctly almost immediately, about 30 to 45 seconds time on the community with no issues for the user experience. If we instead log in under Riley now, we can see that Riley is able to edit data on the organization record and see the staff list associated with the community page for this member organization. So the admin user permissions also have immediate effect for Riley. So Riley was able to log in before, now Riley has administrative access. Sam was able to log in before, now Sam has basic access. Okay. All right, so we've gotten through all of our automation now. So the only thing I have to say is thank you to Jen and Rakesh and David for having me, and open it up for any questions anyone might have about the automation that we created, the process builder, the flow, the formula that we used to make it only a 1 minute or about 30-second pause instead of a 1 hour pause. Be happy to answer questions on any of those topics.
All right, so there is a question from Eric. How do
Okay.
you deal with multiple contacts playing the same role within an organization?
Okay, that's a great question. Let's look at Salesforce. We just got our user pages open. Okay, in this specific situation, we've got, let's go into our Durham Arts Council. So we have 3 custom fields that we're using to indicate which roles a person is playing at the organization. So if we had Riley was, we saw in our staff list that Riley's actually in the finance department. Their title is accounts payable. Say they're also the billing contact. We would add Riley in here. And when the flow is running, because Riley is already an admin user, really no changes to their access to the community are needed. So nothing really fancy happens here. We've just got that same person indicated in both roles on the account record. If we were to remove Riley from either one of these key contact fields, Riley's access would not change, but if we remove Riley from both of these key contact fields, then Riley would be demoted to the basic user. Does that answer your question, Eric? Hopefully.
Okay. Tamar asks, how are you updating the contacts role on the staff-related list after a change?
That's a manual change that's done by the relationship manager. So there's no automation associated with adding or removing somebody as an administrative primary or billing contact. So that would be fairly straightforward to do. The staff list is, if you all are familiar with the Nonprofit Success Pack, that staff list is actually, it's an enhanced lightning grid that's just displaying the affiliated contacts in a read-only fashion so that their community members aren't able to see the information associated with the other people. They're just able to they're able to see them but not edit the information related to those other people. So it's the affiliated contacts list. So that change you could probably just put in a process builder or flow to find their related affiliated contact record and update the role associated with that individual. They do that manually right now, though. The relationship managers do.
Right. Just a reminder, if you have a question, post it in the chat section. We're also taking general process automation questions as well. So we'll give folks a minute or so. While we wait, how did you get started with automation? How did you go about learning process builder and flow?
Oh, that's a really good question. I hadn't done much process build. Well, hadn't done any process builder when I started my current position, and I had done very little flow. And one of the first projects I got put on was to help a client with their list management. It was a custom object that we had created, and they wanted to manage the members' position on a list based on their affiliation with an organization. And so I basically got thrown off the deep end and just started playing around with flow. This was really before Trailhead became what it is now, so there wasn't a whole lot of resources out there. I will admit I spent a lot of time on the Automation Champion blog, so thank you, Rakesh. and all of those that contribute to that blog. That was a huge help for me in learning flow at the time with the old flow builder. It was a lot to understand, almost creating a whole new world within Salesforce, because you had to recreate all of your variables, and that didn't make any sense to me. So that's how I got my start.
Yeah, I'm loving the enhancements that came out with Spring 20 for sure.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
All right, we have a question from Marina. This was amazing, thank you. Only slightly related, but do you have any thoughts on using equals empty string for null versus is null global constant true?
Oh, my default is always is null global constant true. I just think it's a best practice. They give us the is null as an operator. I feel like there's probably a reason. I don't know, Jen, if you know a better answer for that. I feel like there's just probably a reason they give us is null. And I know that there are differences between a value being null and a value being blank. And so I always get concerned that if I do equals empty string, that it won't get those variables that are actually null, because an empty string is not null. They're not the same thing. And so I always just try and be very cautious about using the is null. Do you have the same experience, Jen?
Yeah, I typically use the is null global constant true.
Yeah. Especially when in flow you're having it set a variable to null if nothing's found. I've found that that's the place where it matters the most that you use is null global value true.
Okay, Deepak says, please list few important things that could not be achieved through coding, LWC or Apex, that is only available in Flow Builder.
Oh, goodness. Well, I don't know Lightning Web Components or Apex. So I'm not sure I would be the best person to answer this question. I don't think I could have an answer to this question.
Yeah, and I'm more on the declarative side as well. So Deepak, what I'll ask you to do is if you wouldn't mind going out on the Trailblazer community for Salesforce Automation Hour and posting that question, we'll have someone get back to you and see if like Rakesh or David can respond to that. Right, we'll give it a couple more seconds to see if there are any last minute questions for Sarah.
There was a question a little earlier on that I missed from Guillaume. 1 hour is the minimum. Yes, the 1 hour is the minimum in the new flow builder for a pause. 1 minute used to be the minimum in the old flow builder. So once the new flow builder came out, that pause got real long.
Yes, and I'm really glad you did this presentation because I was like, 1 hour? That's the minimum? Like, are you kidding me?
Are other changes with the new flow builder? Yeah, there are several other changes with the new flow builder. Let's go into the flow builder and let's look at creating a variable. We'll just add a random condition. Okay, so I find creating new resources to be one of the biggest differences for me, at least. If I want to create a variable and I want it to be a collection variable, like even calling it a collection variable isn't as visible now as it was in the old flow builder, where the collection variable was its own type of resource. Now, if you want it to be a collection, you just have to check this box and it becomes a collection, so it can have multiple values. Similarly, if you want to create an SObject variable, which is a variable that can hold values like a record would, instead of creating an S object variable, you select in your variable data type selector, you select the value of record, and that now becomes an S object variable. You have to define which object it's for, but just selecting the data type of record is the way that you build your S object variable. Now, if you want an S object collection variable, because you want to set values for multiple records, you can just check the box. So I find this is very user-friendly for individuals who might be newer to Flow, and the terms S object and collection might be a little bit scary. Though for those of us who made the transition from the old Flow Builder to the new Flow Builder, to me it was a little scary because it wasn't what I was used to. So I was concerned, record, what does that even mean? Where's my S object listing? So that's the biggest change for me. Jen, do you have any others to add?
Well, with the spring 20 changes I was alluding to, when you do a get records, you could now say have Salesforce store all the fields for you, as opposed to going through and picking the specific fields that you want stored, because before, if you didn't store those fields, you can't use them in your flow. And now you could just say automatically store all fields, and then all the fields are available for you to use anywhere in your flow.
That's so cool. I haven't played around with that much myself, but I saw it when I was preparing for this session. When you said the phrase get records, that even is different because it used to be a record lookup, and you had two different ones. You had record lookup or fast lookup, and then you had, for each of the different types of actions, it was like a record update or a fast update, and they meant different things, and that I think was even confusing. So now that it's limited to 4 actions, I think it's a little bit more straightforward how things work.
Yeah, for sure. All right, last call for any more questions.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jen. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. This was very informative, Sarah. And feel free to come back again and present.
I most definitely will. I can't wait to see.
We welcome you with open arms.
Can't wait to see what Flow Challenge comes next down the pipe, and I'd be happy to share it.
Yep, and we'll see you next month in Atlanta.
Yes, definitely. Everyone should come to Atlanta. Please come to Atlanta. Love to see you all in person.
Yeah, Southeast Dreaming, everybody. Yep. So with that, we're going to end Automation Hour, and thank you all for joining. Until next time.